What a fun way to get started. Take a moment to be thankful about all that we can appreciate here about our great state. So now that we've warmed up, let me tell you about the rest of our day. We have a lot of ground to cover. You'll find a packed agenda in your materials. First off, we're going to hear a report from our nation's capital. Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley will join us shortly. Congressman Wyden had planned to join us, but was at the last minute required to stay in Washington, so we'll miss him here today. For most of the morning, we're going to return to a topic we discussed last year, Oregon's fiscal crisis. You'll hear a number of voices on the topic, concluding with Governor Kate Brown. At noon, we're going to switch gears a bit to think about how the upcoming revolution in automation will change our lives and our work and our economy, and what we need to do to prepare for that. We'll dive more deeply into these subjects in the early afternoon sessions where we'll enlist your full engagement to examine both opportunities and the threats of new technology. Later breakout sessions will cover a wide range of subjects aimed at finding ways to improve the conditions for economic growth in Oregon. These topics may seem disconnected, but they're not. You see, to maintain a strong economy that gives all of us the opportunity to prosper, we need good schools, we need good health care, we need good transportation, and we need other critical public services. In the face of disruptive technological change, we need those services even more. Yet Oregon's mounting fiscal crisis threatens to curtail those investments. This brings me to our question for the day. Is Oregon future ready? I hope you'll reflect on that question as we move throughout the day. So let's begin. It's my pleasure to introduce our first panel. What happens in Washington, D.C. has a major effect on Oregon, from tax reform to health care to forest policy. The stakes couldn't be higher for our state. We're honored to have Senators Wyden and Merkley with us today to talk about these and other issues. If you haven't noticed, things are a little busy in Washington, D.C. these days, and we can't thank them enough for taking the time to be here. Debbie Kitchin will lead the discussion with the senators. Debbie is the co-owner of Interworks, LLC, a successful home renovation business. She's also a member of the Portland Business Alliance and a very active member of the Oregon Business Plan Steering Committee. Over the years, the Portland Business Alliance has been a wonderful partner of the business plan. Each spring, PBA organizes an Oregon Business Plan trip to Washington, D.C., inviting leaders from all over the state to join and meet with our federal officials. We couldn't think of a better person to lead this discussion than Debbie. Please welcome Senator Ron Wyden and Senator Jeff Merkley and Debbie Kitchin.
Okay.
Everybody,
And
where'd you like it? I want to get in the middle. That's always the action.
All right. Well, thank you, Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley, for being here today. I know things are very, very busy up on the Hill, and we just really appreciate you being here. And especially, Senator Wyden, you founded this event, and we just are so appreciative of your participation year after year in this. And for both of you to be here today when so much is going on, we really appreciate it. The Senate passed a tax reform bill.
I heard a rumor about that.
Yes. So could you go ahead and address that? What are you hearing from your constituents? What are your concerns about the bill?
Abe Iban, the great Israeli diplomat, said that the Americans always get it right after they've tried everything else. And the Congress is definitely in the trying everything else department right now. And the major provisions of the bill are just certain to change. And I'm going to briefly tell you why, and I know my colleague will get into this too. The bill is just a horrible fit for Oregon. It's kind of like somebody wearing a tuxedo to the beach. Congress is barreling, for example, towards eliminating the deduction for state income taxes. This is a federal law that lets 670,000 Oregonians deduct from their federal taxes each dollar they spend on state taxes. And that money, of course, goes for law enforcement and fire and roads and schools and basic services. And the reality is the state code is connected to the federal code. So what you have is a double whammy on Oregon's middle class because we lose out on both counts. And in addition to that, the bill puts a dagger into the heart of the Affordable Care Act, which means that folks are going to have higher health insurance premiums, and we're going to have a lot of people lose coverage. And I'm going to close just with one last point. It didn't have to be this way. I've written 2 full bipartisan federal income tax reform plans with loyalists of Mitch McConnell's. But the Republicans, after a year when they didn't pass any legislation, just decided we're going to do it our way. It's going to be an all-partisan bill. And that means we don't have the certainty and predictability that all of you have been telling us at these summits is so important to you, the ability to make some calculations. And so we're going to be in the business of fixing it. That's going to start tomorrow because some of you may have read the Wall Street Journal article this morning that because this bill was written in such reckless haste, they actually messed up the research and development tax credit, which is so important to so many of you, again, based on what Senator Merkley and I have said. So we want it understood that we believe coming up with solutions is the Oregon way. It's a bipartisan way. We're going to be in the fix-it business starting tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Senator Merkley, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, let's just take a big overview. If you're going to do a massive stimulus to spend $1.5 trillion of deficit funding, do you do it when the economy is at this point, or you do it the economy when you're in recession? So that's a question, but I would say most economists would say you provide that stimulus when the economy is not improving, not doing well, and that is not now. So the timing of this is way off. The second thing is the design of it. Do you design it so it helps the middle class so they have more spending power, buy more products, and then companies can expand their production and add workers? Or do you do it as a benefit to the best off in our society? And the way this is structured is a benefit to the best off in our society. The bottom third, the analysis that was in the Oregonian, those earning less than $30,000 a year, they'll pay more in taxes. In the middle class, you have 87 million people who will pay more in taxes just in the first year, and the number goes up significantly as the individual tax benefits expire, but the corporate tax benefits do not expire after that 10 years. And then you have, and so if I can say that, you can kind of think of the bottom third, not much help at all. The middle third, mixed bag, but taxes up on 87 million. The top third, really well off. And 2/3 of the benefits go to the top 1% in America. So if you're in that top 1%, this is truly a time to party. But that really doesn't make sense in terms of building the foundation for families to thrive. If you're going to spend this kind of money, and we're spending, even though it's only $1.5 trillion deficit, there's other offsets, and that means that we're spending upwards of $5 trillion with more than $3 trillion going to the very richest. If you're going to spend $3 trillion, how about we strengthen infrastructure? How about we increase K-12 funding as a foundation? How about we make college more affordable? Let's put people to work. So the timing's wrong, the distribution is wrong, and we could spend these funds in ways that would really, really help families succeed, but that's not this bill.
Great, okay, thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. It's going to be a very tough next few weeks as we deal with these issues in our country, and I know you guys are going to be there looking out for Oregonians all through that process. But another topic that is very important here in Oregon is our federal forests. And so this last summer, we saw devastating wildfires throughout our state. The cost to the federal government was very high. And do you think this is the time to start a new framework for management of our federal forests?
Debbie, in one word, absolutely. The reality is, particularly, and both of us have been involved in this, the system of fighting fire is all topsy-turvy. It basically says we're going to permanently give fire prevention short shrift. The way it works is the prevention side, going in there and thinning and doing all the stuff that makes it so hot on the forest floor when it's hot and dry and you have lightning strikes, boom. All of that gets short shrift in the budget. Then you have an inferno. The federal government borrows from the prevention fund to put the fire out, and the problem gets worse. We saw this summer developments we could not have dreamed of. A fire leaping across the Columbia River. The fires are bigger, the fires are hotter. This is unprecedented. So my top priority for the end of the year budget, and Senator Merkley and I will be working on this together, is to end fire borrowing, to make sure we stop shortchanging prevention. We treat the big fires as the disasters that they are, pay for it from the disaster fund, and make sure that we can do the preventive work that we've been doing. Now, this has been the longest running battle since the Trojan War. We have been at it for years, but Senator Mike Crapo, the Republican from Idaho, a senior member of the Senate, he and I have been working with the Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue. Folks, this is the year, this is the time. We've never seen fires like this. You've got two United States senators that are committed to overhauling this system, and when we do this, getting us back into better fire management as well.
Great. Senator Merkley, would you like to add your thoughts?
Well, this is so important that Senator Wyden, as a senior member of Energy and Natural Resources, been driving this strategy, and we assembled a whole group of Western senators to advocate that we get this done this year. So I think we have momentum for it. Another piece of this is I'm trying to get funding in the final budget bill that essentially would be $580 million for forest thinning. And we have here in Oregon 1.6 million acres that has already gone through the environmental approval for thinning. And so if we thin those forests, we end up with a win-win, less disease, far more resistance to fires, and a steady supply of saw logs for our mills. And then we're asking for another $200 million to restore the infrastructure that was in the federal forest that was burned in these fires. And finally, we're pushing for measures that will help the communities that were affected economically as a result of the smoke and the fires. So those three things on the budget side to go along with changing the structure of how we pay for fighting fires. And by the way, I just say, this thinning strategy is working really well in stewardship agreements and in collaboratives. Here in Oregon, Oregon's the leader in this. We're also producing timber that can go to cross-laminated timber and new products in the forest industry. But it's a real win-win. We don't want to return to the forest wars of the past. Let's thin these forests, produce saw logs, and make the forest healthier.
Great, thank you, thank you. Well, now let's turn to immigration. Immigration reform has been part of the Oregon business agenda for some time. We believe it's a workforce issue. We need qualified workers for all kinds of industry. Do you see a potential for immigration reform anytime soon? And what do you expect to happen with DACA? Let's start with you first, Senator Merkley.
So we had a very optimistic moment a little while ago, it seems several weeks ago now, that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer met with the president, and they reached the outlines of a deal to be part of the end of the year proposal that involved addressing the Dreamers. And that deal now has fallen apart. And it means that we're going to have to push really hard to get the DREAM Act done. There are many of us that feel like this end of the year has to be the moment that we force the DREAM Act to be voted on, and I think we will win it if it's voted on. Those who have come here as children, who know no other country, who have become full parts of our society, they don't even speak another language, it's time to address this. They are in limbo. They are in a horrific space right now, so we're going to push very hard on this. But meanwhile, if you notice, the president has, at the last week, done several things to try to aggravate the immigration debate. One was to put up those videos kind of sowing hatred between Muslims and non-Muslims, really bad. A second was when there was a meeting planned with the leadership of the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate at the White House just before it. He put out a statement attacking Democrats on immigration. So we're going to have to be very solid and clear in what we're doing and make it part of must-pass spending bill here at the end of the year if we're going to get it done. I believe there should be the 2013 immigration bill that passed the Senate, bipartisan basis, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans really put it together. That was an extraordinary example of bipartisan problem solving. I'd love to see that bill enacted. But right now, our best hope is to fight for the DREAM Act.
And I think I know you want to talk about Medicaid, Debbie. What Senator Merkley has just described is what we call the Oregon way, which is solutions and not standoffs, rather than the Washington way, which is angry tweets and gratuitous insults. And what he's described is what we're going to have to work through at the end of the year.
Great, thank you, thank you. Yes, I did want to ask a question about Medicaid. With the tax reform and concerns about budget deficits, will we have an issue with funding Medicaid in the future? Oregon has really stepped up in terms of the Oregon Health Plan to have lots of people enrolled. What do you think the impact's going to be for Oregonians?
Well, as the ranking Democrat on the Finance Committee, that's a special priority of mine. And folks, I don't have to tell you that in much of rural Oregon, Medicaid is an economic anchor. There are a lot of older people who live in rural Oregon. We've got a lot of our rural health care facilities. And Medicaid is very vulnerable now for 2 reasons. The first is, as I indicated, the tax bill has a dagger to the heart of the Affordable Care Act. And as you see efforts to unravel it, eliminate protection for people with pre-existing conditions, you know that the next step is to move away from Oregon's Medicaid expansion, which has been so important to our state. And in fact, their next step is something called Graham-Cassidy, which moves away from all of the commitments that Oregon has guaranteed for our people and just basically turns Medicaid into a giant block grant. So what we're going to be doing, at least on the Finance Committee, is seeing if we can come up with a bipartisan path to limit the damage. But this is a time when Oregon is very vulnerable. And to give you some additional information about why this is so imminent, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, has said the very first thing he wants to do after the tax bill is he wants to go after entitlements, which puts Medicaid directly in the crosshairs. So we've had bipartisan support for health care issues in our state in the past. Now we've got to export some of that bipartisanship on health to Washington, D.C.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Senator Merkley, you serve on the Senate Appropriations Committee. We are already a few months into fiscal year 18 without a spending bill in place. What are the chances of getting an omnibus bill passed this year? Or I think I heard it needs to be passed this week or something to not shut down the government. What are your appropriation priorities for Oregon?
So our government is only funded through December 8th. Obviously, that's a couple days from now. I think you're going to see at this moment the likelihood is a 2-week extension. So we'll take us up to the 22nd. Very hard thing to inform your family that you're going to be working on Christmas Eve again. but that's the type of pressure that it takes often to get something done. There are so many planes circling right now. The Children's Health Insurance Program has not been refunded or reauthorized, and Oregon is in the first group of 5 states where that money's running out. It's running out this month. Another 25 states will run out next quarter. The authorization for the flood insurance program has not been done, so that's a big problem. You have the funding for our clinics, our federally qualified health centers. That has not been reauthorized. That has to be done. And then you have the issues of things that need to be included with the bill, like the DREAM Act that I mentioned. So all of that has to be resolved in a short period of time, maybe 1 or 2 short-term extensions in the process. Hopefully, by the time we get to the end of that, a lot of the work done in the Appropriation Committee will be incorporated into an omnibus. But I expect a temporary continuing resolution, maybe another 2-week continuing resolution, and then an omnibus. That'd be a potential pattern. But let me mention the types of things I'm able to fight for in appropriations, things that are characteristic to Oregon. One is our small ports over on the coast. We've been getting them dredged much more regularly, and we're trying to get it to where all of them are dredged each year. We're not quite there yet. Another is funding the research for cross-laminated timber. By being able to take the appropriation bill and direct money that goes to Oregon State to do the research for the joints and the fire burns and so forth, we're really starting to open up a whole new industry there that's very exciting. The Water Infrastructure Innovation Act. That is an act I wrote, but then got funded through the Appropriations Committee to assist the communities to be able to do clean water supply, wastewater treatment. Very important to Oregon. Sudden oak death in Southwest Oregon, and then in special help with the irrigation projects in Central Oregon, where they're addressing the spotted frog challenge. Those are a handful of the types of things that able to tackle, and hopefully that's why we want to get from a continuing resolution to an omnibus so that those improvements that I've won in committee can actually get into the final bill.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So we are coming to the end of our time, but we'd like to give you both an opportunity to talk about whatever your final thoughts are, our last thoughts for, we're in a political era unlike any we've seen. And there are so many issues that we're facing. There is a lot of strife in Congress, and I think we have hope that we could come together with good people like you working on these things. But we'll start with Senator Merkley, and then we'll let Senator Wyden have the last word.
I think we all expect each day to pinch ourselves and discover that we've just been dreaming about what has transpired in the last year. I think often about the word indivisible, and that is because it's in our Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. But what we have seen over the last year of the campaign and the first year of the presidency is driving divisions between our parts of our society. I am so ready for us to turn the corner back to valuing the diversity of America and the contributions that everyone makes. And I feel like when any group is attacked, let's stand with them shoulder to shoulder. If our Hispanics are attacked, let's stand with them. If our African Americans are attacked, let's stand with them. If our immigrants are attacked, let's stand with them. If our Muslim community is attacked, let's stand with them. Senator Wyden uses the phrase Oregon way. Let me just extend that to say that's the way we do things in Oregon. Let's heal these divisions and work together to create a foundation for families to thrive across our nation.
Senator Merkley's made the point that nobody is free unless everybody is free. And that's the point of the Agenda for Justice. And I'm going to close by commenting on what happened 15 years ago when we started the summit. Nobody thought it was going anywhere. It was a freezing rain day. Duncan Wise said maybe 20 people will show up. I said, well, we have people in Northeast Portland, we can get it up to 30. And people said, well, okay, it was worth trying. Here we are 15 years later, and what a contrast between the summit and what's happened in Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., I think it was around 1:45 in the morning when I closed the debate, I said that people are going to be stunned in disbelief when they find out what's really in this bill and the broken promises to so many Americans. And what I really was speaking to, and I'll be seeing it this week again, because you're going to hear a lot of talk in the media about a conference between the House and Senate. Make no mistake about it. The big decisions are going to be made in secret on this tax conference. I'm the ranking Democrat. I'm not going to be one of those who's being asked to go through how you fix the research and development tax credit provision that the Wall Street Journal says got messed up. So what I'm going to be doing is what you all do at this summit, which is constantly out in the open with people from all walks of life in different communities, where somebody from Portland sees a friend from Burns, and somebody from Burns sees somebody from the coast. And out in the open, you try to bring people together and find solutions. We don't have all the answers. We don't pretend to. I had my 80th town meeting yesterday to try to make sure that once again, Oregonians had a chance to comment on this issue of taxes. Senator Merkley and I basically were sleepless, and I had to wake him up in Minneapolis or he would have missed the plane. But that's because what your two United States senators have tried to say is we get the message of this summit. What looked impossible 15 years ago, bringing people together and doing it in the open, is now a reality. We are going to do our best to take the summit spirit to Washington, D.C., and try to find new ways to bring people together and tackle the challenges of the days ahead. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Please join. Yes, thank you very much for being here. Wonderful job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senators Wyden and Merkley and Debbie, for leading that discussion. Certainly what happens in Washington these days, the big issues they're tackling, have implications for Oregonians and for Oregon's economy. We appreciate you advocating for us there.